So is it a social issue that it's difficult to pay with cash because they keep saying it's much more convenient to tap your card?
Well, that's from the merchant's perspective. Perhaps things move through more quickly if you've if you're doing a coffee, for example, coffee shop, you want to move people along. But I think it is a social issue. There are certain significant minorities in this country who rely on cash, and one of them being senior citizens who are not actually tuned into the digital area. Sometimes it's people who are live in regional or rural locations. I think the Bureau of Statistics said there's roughly over 2 million people who have either no or infrequent access to the internet. So how they're supposed to pay for things and conduct transactions, I just don't know. So yes, there are groups like disabled people who sometimes rely on their carers to go and buy food for them. They don't want to give them one of their payment cards. They want to give them some cash because then they know how much has gone out and how much will come back. And then there's those on low incomes, many of whom, of course, won't even have a bank account. So how they're meant to use the digital payments, again, is beyond me.
Steve, yes, financial inclusion is a big part of this, isn't it? And indeed. It's a very positive feature of cash, but isn't it true that everybody needs cash every now and then?
Well, I called it the AAA accreditation of cash, the benefits of cash. First of all, it's accepted nearly everywhere, and in situations such as telecoms and information technology outages, which occur with the providers of those things, sometimes then it's the only way of paying for goods and services that you've consumed. Plus, we've got in Australia lots of floods, lots of fires, lots of earthquakes, cyclones. Yesterday, there was a big storm in Victoria. Trains were stopped, lots of outages, people being denied electricity. Those are situations where we need to have cash with us because it's accepted in lieu of any other transaction possibilities. Secondly, cash doesn't require authorization. It's not needed. You don't need to give your payment card details, especially your 3-digit security code. And there's no need for passwords, or you don't get follow-up emails. You don't get sort of people saying, can you score us out of 10, how your service was? And finally, and most importantly, in my opinion, cash is anonymous. People seek anonymity. We don't want to know, we don't want everyone to know or other people to know what we've purchased, how much we spent, where the money came from, and who we are. And that brings me on to that last bit. The anonymity is important because many people are terrified of being scammed or fraudsters getting hold of their information. And this is where it comes from. Many of our personal details, for example, date of birth and card numbers and so on, are often can be found on the dark web. Not that I've ever been it myself, which explains how we get scammers coming onto us, connecting us directly, knowing our phone numbers, sometimes knowing our names. I think a lot of people actually would prefer some anonymity rather than everything being recorded and therefore vulnerable to being taken down by scammers.
Yes, have you heard of the term surveillance capitalism?
I think I have, yes, and I think I can understand what it is, yeah.
Yes, I think George Orwell thought privacy was a threat to the state, but privacy seems to be a threat to the corporations.
Well, indeed, and it's a threat to our own security as well, because as I pointed out, we're being perpetually scammed. We're losing an awful lot of money to that and various frauds. And I think we need to be more aware of just how much information we give away freely and willingly, and what can be done with it, because we've seen lots of what's the word for it, when scammers people break into the organization's IT systems and take out all of that detail for their use. And that's very threatening.
Yes. There's two ways that countries are attacking this, protecting cash, I mean, access and acceptance. Do you have a view about how both of these approaches work to preserve the cash economy?
Yes, I do, and some examples of how this can work. If we talk about access to start with, in the United Kingdom, legislation was passed into Parliament last year. No person in the United Kingdom will be more than 3 miles from a fee-free ATM. So there's a a distance limitation here. You can't be more than 3 miles away from an ATM machine that doesn't charge a fee. And also banks are being encouraged to open what's called cash pods to enable people to actually withdraw and deposit cash in an unmanned situation, as it were, an unpersoned situation. Sweden similarly has come out, and Sweden was once the pet, of the cashless society, the golden child. But in Sweden now they've legislated that every bank branch must accept cash deposits and provide cash withdrawals. So there's a minimum area here. And moving on to other aspects, in America and USA, some states and some cities, e.g. Florida and San Francisco, to use one of each, have legislated that merchants must accept cash. It's a requirement in those areas where the legislation can be made, that they must accept cash. And I think that we need some sort of similar legislative interventions here in Australia to protect the access to cash and the use of cash, because quite frankly, if we don't use it, we will lose it. And then it'll be like paper checks, one thing that we remember briefly, but it's long gone. I mean, paper checks, the last we're supposed to be, there won't be any use of that after 2030, which is 6 years away.
And I think Ireland is now talking about mandating cash acceptance for some retailers.
I think that's a good idea, and however they choose to define that, but I think that's something that we need to look for in Australia, some intervention here into that area to make sure that cash is both accessible and usable.
Yes, because providing access to cash in your local community like the UK doesn't guarantee that you can use that cash at the supermarket, does it?
Not really, no. But at least you can access it, and hopefully with another way of looking at it, you can hopefully use it and etc. So yes, at least we'll have access, and then hopefully usage will follow.
Steve, is there structural issues in our financial system that are hurting or working against the cash economy?
Well, I think there are, yes. Firstly, banks and building societies and credit unions, etc., all trying to reduce their costs. And some of these come from premises that they use, personnel that they employ, third-party providers who, for example, do cash replenishment and collection of cash to be accounted, whatever. So I think the whole societal shift to digitalization means we're doing less and less face-to-face discussions, as in a bank branch. Well, you're not even doing less and less voice-to-voice call centers. How long do we have to wait till somebody tells us that they're actually going to speak to us? So I think it's also perhaps becoming not very fashionable for young people to carry cash in a purse or a wallet. Plus, there's some danger that you might lose it. But my thought on this one is we're currently in what's being called a cost of living crisis, and this makes budgeting with physical money more attractive. You see how much you're paying, and you choose how you might be able to better manage that if you're trying to won't worry about the costs of actually living. So I can foresee, and I would forecast actually, an uptick in cash withdrawals in 2024. So I think we might be seeing, well, I hope we'll see that anyway.
Yeah. Banks, the cash industry, the regulators are all meeting now, talking about ways they can support the cash distribution system in Australia. What do you think we can look forward to coming out of this process that is underway now?
Well, remember the old cliche, forecasting is always difficult, particularly as regards the future. But I will make some suggestions.
That's why I'm asking you.
Yeah, no. So my thoughts on this are, I think at the end of the meeting that's going on between those various parties, there will be some financial support for the cash industry suppliers. That is the people who actually bring cash out to us in armored cars and take cash away where necessary. There'll be some encouragement, in inverted commas, to the banks to slow down the rate of bank branch closures and ATM withdrawals. And I think also there'll be strong words again about the maintenance of cash as a payment option from the RBA and the regulators. They'll just have strong words saying we want to keep cash as a payment instrument.
There's no shortage of cashless society predictions, but there's actually more cash circulating in the economy right now than ever before. Can you seriously see a time when we can be a cashless, or we will be a cashless society?
I don't think we'll see that in our lifetimes, quite frankly. I think there'll be a demand for cash because it's something that, as we mentioned, does have its own AAA accreditation. Cash, as well as a usage in payments, of course, is also highly valued as a store of wealth and or as for precautionary savings. And to your question, the RBA estimates that there's between 56 and $81 billion of physical notes held by households. That's about 55 to 80% of all of the banknotes in circulation. But predominantly, these notes being held as a store of wealth are either $50 or $100 notes, the high denomination notes. So my only end comment there would be cash may no longer be king of payments, but it's still a member of the payments family. And I think that's where it will stay here with us because of that dual usage. Payments, yes, but the store of wealth obviously has a great appeal to many Australians.
Steve, just lastly, before I let you go, there's a lot of confusion in Australia between two separate pieces of advice. One from the RBA. The RBA Act 1959 says Australian notes are legal tender throughout Australia, and the ACCC advises consumers, businesses don't have to accept cash. So what is the legal situation? Are businesses breaking the law in not accepting cash?
I don't think, technically speaking, they're breaking the law, no. I think the RBA hived off the regulatory feature of this to the ACCC. And as you pointed out, they're saying it's not something that's obligatory for any merchant, retailer, whatever you want to call them, to accept. We could dispute that, and we could see if we can push to get that changed as a feeling. But that actually is the law as it stands. There's no compulsion to accept cash. And I'm trying to point out that.
Yeah, and
I've some. Go on, you follow.
Oh yeah, my petition is just about this issue, just clearing up this question, because so many people seem to believe and seem to be ready to say this is legal tender, you have to accept it, and are confused at why shops are allowed not to accept cash.
All I can say to that one is that yes, that's totally right. It is confusing, and people would imagine that everyone should accept cash. The only other advantage of cash is you don't pay a surcharge on when you're paying with cash. I think that's a good point which needs driving home as surcharging increases in its variety of ways, and also sometimes in terms of the percentages people are charging as a surcharge.
Well, that's the other piece of confusion. If a retailer doesn't accept cash, are they allowed to surcharge us for cashless payments, like a card or a phone?
Indeed, yes, they're certainly allowed to do that. They're meant to actually put up a sign that says, if you pay by card or digital wallet, you will be surcharged. It doesn't actually say if you pay by cash, you won't be surcharged, but it's certainly, they're meant to. Now, not every place has that sign up. And also, from my experiences, when you come to the terminal and you bought a coffee and it's $5, you tap on for $5 on the terminal, that's what it says. And when I look at my statements, which is a very rare thing to do, I see that it's actually $5.05. And I think, well, where did that come from? Well, that's the surcharge being slipped in by the merchant. And I think that definitely is against the ACCC's requirements for the ability to surcharge. And it should be no more than the merchant fees that you're being charged anyway, which in some cases it is more than that.
And always needs to be disclosed up front.
It does indeed.
Thank you very much, Steve Worthington. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks for the questions.
Cheers.